Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope you're all doing well today. Today I've got some Dogman encounters to share with you. But before we get into those encounters, a couple links I'd like to share. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch to help this channel to continue to grow and go. Those links are in the description below. Also, my second channel for creepypasta, fanfiction, and scary voice acting. Stories that don't fit on this channel. Now, if that's anything that you're into, follow that link and give those stories a listen. You may just like what you hear. I also started a GoFundMe page a while back to help raise some money for urbex, cryptid hunting, and ghost hunting equipment. Right now, I'm working on producing a video for you. It's short, but rather interesting. Hopefully, I can master it and get it out to you. Also, after this video, there'll be a little commercial for Q centerfire rifles. That link will be in the description below. I urge you to go and visit their website. You will be impressed. And with that, guys, let's get on with these Dogman encounters. Shall we? Today's first Dogman encounter. The night of our encounter was not long after I bought my car. My friend Shane and I were out driving around the local towns and villages, playing some tunes on the cassette player and generally just cruising about. It must have been late because it was dark by the time we passed through a small coastal village of Cresswell, Northumberland, so I'm assuming it was around 11 o'clock. I remember we were heading southwest from Cresswell to Ellington on Cresswell Road, having just passed the entrance to a caravan site on the left. I hadn't yet had the opportunity to test the extra fog lights on the front of the vehicle and wanted to see how bright they were in the dark. Shane was looking in the glove compartment for a different cassette, and I told him I was going to switch on the fogs. We were coming up on a slight right-hand bend. There was a 6-foot wall of dense foliage on our left and a normal hedgerow bordering a field on our right. That was when I saw something run out into the middle of the road. It wasn't going very fast, probably 30 miles an hour max, and I had ample time to slow down so as not to hit it. Even to stop, but I'm not sure I did. I think I just crawled the car towards it as I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It had run out into the road from my right and stopped right in the middle of the road, looking directly at my car. It was covered in a thick, mossy gray, brown fur about 2 to 3 inches long and stood on its rear legs, which were jointed with the knee at the rear like a horse or a dog's. Its upper arms were down by its side, and it held its forearms out in front of it, with its hands and long fingers hung down at the wrist. They may have been long hands or long fingers, but I remember the hands from the wrist to the fingers as being very long. It had one foot in front of the other, as in mid-step, as it seemed to have been caught by surprise. And while its body was still facing in the direction it was traveling, the head was facing me in my car. I remember with eyes which reflected the light back at me, being perfectly round and a greenish yellow color, much like a cat's eyes when caught in the light. It stood about 5 or 6 feet tall, but was hunched over. Even then, I'd say it couldn't have been over 6 feet tall when it stood erect. It had what seemed to be a very muscular body. Not big or bulky, more wiry with powerful limbs, thick chest, and a small waist. It also had a short tail, maybe 4 to 5 inches long. Definitely not as long as most dogs. Personally, I'd describe it more like a goat's tail. After seeing this, I mainly searched for sightings of satyrs in the region, as this was the closest thing I could relate it to. Its head and face were like that of a dog or a goat, as in not flat like a human's face, but with a muzzle and quite large ears. I don't remember seeing any teeth, and it didn't have any horns. The whole encounter couldn't have lasted more than a few seconds. I assume it regained its composure after being caught off guard, as it took off over a 6-foot wall and through the foliage atop that was in a single bound. Although I often drive by that same area, I've never seen it again. As far as how I felt, I was in shock at first, like when someone gives you a fright. I shouted, "Shane! Shane!" to make sure he was looking as he was fishing around the glove box for a cassette. I just couldn't take it all in, after it had gone and we were still going slow. We were looking back to where it had disappeared, and I felt terrified. I always considered myself a fairly macho type of guy and not easily scared, but there was no way in hell I was getting out of my car to follow that thing. In fact, as we drove on a ways, there was a guy walking his dog further up the road, maybe a half a mile. I considered telling him not to go that way. We slowed down, but we honestly didn't know what to say, and we decided he was far enough away from it, so we just kept going. We were still really shook up at that point. Oh, I forgot to mention, neither Shane or myself had been under the influence of drugs or alcohol. It's very hard to talk about, as, quite frankly, most people don't believe me. Today's second Dogman encounter. In 1983, myself and 3 other friends were out driving around Holy Hill area. I was 18 years old at the time, and it was late evening, around 11:30 or so. As I drove through the winding wooded road up ahead in my headlight beam, we saw a wolf ruck across the road on 2 legs. After it had cleared the road, it got down onto all 4s and ran off into the woods, briefly looking back at us. We never reported this because who would believe 4 teenagers joyriding at night? But I did tell my family and a few close friends. I'm still in contact with 2 of the people who saw this with me. Now, at the age of 47, I thought I would share my story. The main thing that has been ingrained in my brain was that it walked on 2 legs across the road. I remember saying, "Wolves don't do that, do they?" The girls were scared and told me to start driving and get out of there. It was summertime, or we wouldn't have been out that late, and the trees had heavy foliage. Today's third Dogman encounter. I used to work in Princeton, Minnesota from 2005 to 2006. I lived in St. Cloud, Minnesota, and commuted the 40 minutes to work, taking State Highway 95 between St. Cloud and Princeton. In March of 2006, I hit a deer at night on the way home from work, so I was a little more cautious when driving home after that. The place where I had struck the deer was the northern edge of Shelburne National Wildlife Refuge, which butts up to the highway. Consequently, I would slow down to about 45 miles an hour when I'd approach the refuge and drive holding down the high beam switch. This allows me to drive with both high and low beams on at the same time. In mid-April, about 6 weeks after I had struck the deer, I was passing the refuge, driving slowly, looking for deer. I saw the reflection of the eyes, like a deer or a raccoon, near the south bank of the highway. I slowed down further, and the animal bolted out 20 feet in front of my car. It crossed the road from south to north. I wish I could tell you that it was another deer, but I'm convinced that I wasn't. Whatever it was, it moved on 2 legs, not 4. I only saw it for a few seconds, and my adrenaline was pumping, thinking I was gonna hit another animal. But I can see the flashes of what I saw in front of me in my mind's eye as clear as yesterday. Its forward limbs didn't touch the ground. It was bipedal, maybe 6 or 7 feet tall. It was brown or maybe gray. The eyes were reflective like a deer's. Its limbs were long and robust like a man's, not spindly like a deer. I think that it was covered with hair or fur, accounting for the color, and the shape of its face was not flat like a man's, but to a point, having a snout like a dog. It ran north across the highway, and I accelerated west toward St. Cloud. Damnedest thing I ever saw. I have a degree in anthropology with a minor in biology, and a degree to teach social studies. I'm a teetotaler, and I have no serious religious convictions. At this point, I'm not prone to flights of fancy or wild imagination. I didn't see a deer or a black bear, and if it was a man in a suit, he ran the risk of becoming roadkill. This looked a lot like what folks have been describing as the Michigan Dogman, or the so-called Beast of Bray Road. I get the sense that it did have triangular ears. I can't be totally sure of that, though. I didn't see its feet, however, the walk seemed like it was a spring in its step. That makes me think that it was not walking flat-footed, but on the balls of its feet. Today's fourth and final Dogman encounter. My sighting happened as my husband and I were driving around at night in the late autumn of the year 2010 or 2011. I was on the passenger side just idly looking out my window, and I saw something crouched down beside a white car. It started running alongside our truck, the opposite side of some parallel parked cars on the road. The way it ran was akin to a cheetah in fast motion. The hind legs were lunging all the way forward past the front ones. I seen that it was very skinny. I could see the vertebrae on its back, ribs, and shoulder blades. After about 50 meters, there was some houses, so it stood up on its hind legs and turned its head, which swiveled on its shoulders like a human and looked dead at us long enough for me to get a real good look at it. It took a quick glance into the woods and, in a single bound, leapt the whole length of the cut line, about 15 feet. It had shoulders like a man and the head and face of a dog, yellow eyes, and no discernible genitals. I could see that its hair was very short and almost iridescent against the gray skin. Its arms hung like a man's, but its hands were also like a man's, but with long dew-claw-style thumb. After it jumped into the woods, I looked at my husband, and he just looking at it and turned and said, "Did you see that too?" The hair must have been gray as well. It reflected a lot of light. I remember seeing the face had an elongated snout. It was kind of snarled. Its ears were similar to a dog's pointed ear near the top of its head. The tail was kind of bushy compared to the rest of it. Its legs and had hips like a human and thighs also like a human, but had an inverted ankle like a dog. Its feet were long, but only the front pads appeared to be touching the ground. It was a fairly lit area. The other side of the road was a residential area. It didn't notice me. I think it may have interrupted it because it was kind of hidden behind a car when I first spotted it, and it immediately looked up and started running. It seemed more annoyed than anything. By the time it stopped running, it was 30 meters in front of my truck on the other side of the cars, parked on the road, so it sprinted really fast. Wow, guys. 4 Dogman encounters bothering motorists. You know, not only is the Dogman in the woods a dangerous creature, because we really don't know what it's gonna do. I mean, like I said last night in the community post, I've got a amazing encounter that was brought to my attention by a retired police officer. And that is a very violent story. I'm waiting to share it. Debating on it, actually. It's very violent. I'm excited that I have it. But now these dogmen are messing with motorists. You know, we all hear about them, how they run out in front of cars. It's like they want to cause an accident or something, or they're just being a pain in the ass. I'm convinced that they're doing it purposely to slow us down and get us out of the car, or maybe make us crash so they can possibly drag us to a better place to feast on us. I don't know. That's just my perception of what they're doing. Or they could just be running across the road like a deer and stop dead in our headlights. Who knows? I'd like to hear what you guys think of the matter. And with that, guys, I bid you farewell. Oh yeah, please stay tuned and check out Q's mini commercial by none other than me, Jeffrey Nadolny. The honey badger. Zoologists tell us pound for pound is the most fearless and ferocious mammal to walk the earth, untamed and aggressive, a critter not to be messed with. The Dogman. Cryptozoologists said this creature is cunning, savage, and godless. Two of the most terrifying beasts meet, only one will come out alive. Q centerfire rifles gave humans a fighting chance. The honey badger. 300 blackout, original and unique. The Dogman and other cryptids will now know fear. The honey badger, the fix, and the sugar weasel. Click on the link and check out all of Q's badass firearms, accessories, and swag.